You're listening to We All Go Forward, a podcast on self-leadership through setbacks. With ownership, action, and growth, be set back, only to be catapulted forward into a more progressed, truer you.
Hey guys, welcome back. So excited to be here with you today. Today, I have an idea of we're going to be speaking about accountability. And I think that was very timely, specifically with if you tune into last week's episode, which child, I hope you didn't. I'm cracking myself up because y'all, I know that's going to make you want to go and listen, but look here. What's that guy? Let me tell you something real quick. Okay. So last week was the mindsets, like how you could sometimes have like a low moment emotionally when you are going through certain pivots and transitions that you signed up for. You know what I mean? So I think what made it hard, or what I felt like was what made it bad, was because it was like the pace, the real time, me processing, all my feels. But what was good about it is that if you didn't tune in / don't, I want to just capture real quick here that I was talking about how podcasting reveals where you are in life. I made some decisions. I had a response to how I felt about making those decisions. And now that became reflected in my podcasting habits. And I really think that's a great place to start to talk about our topic today, right? Because just like me, you may be struggling with either indecision or a decision you've made, and there's a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety surrounding it. And I assure you, even if the decision is not a bad one, right? A lot of times decisions are neutral. They're not good, they're not bad, but our responses to, oh, what did I do? And how we act with that emotion, now we kind of start entering into the good or bad, or I should say positive or negative behaviors. So either way, when you make the decision, we have to own it. The accountability is ours. And that's where I think we can, if you look at your life, there might be something that is reflecting back to you where you are. If you're showing up in your podcasting, in your work, in your parenting, in your relationships, in your public speaking, if you're showing up anywhere inconsistent or fearful, less confident, it's because something in your life is making you feel that way, and why not address it? So today we're addressing it from the standpoint of decision making. I think if we can get more accountable with what we've chosen to do, then we'll likely show up better, more authentic, more wiser, more evolved. And that's what this podcast is all about. All right, let's get started. Today I was doing some journaling, and the journaling connected so well. I want everybody to come along with me on like this journal entry that I did today. So it was pretty much about indecision. Actually, let me give a shout out real quick to my cousin Curleen. When she found out about my job pivot, she told me that she had went through something very similar, and that came up a lot in this season. So if you're a person who left your job, or your job left you, what I will say is that, of course, exercise caution, but sometimes the reason why you do have to be transparent, the reason why you have to story tell, the reason why you have to, here's a churchy term, testify, is because if you don't, you're undercutting somebody else's transformation, somebody else's evolution, and their ability to move forward just based off of hearing themselves and someone else's story, right? We talked about the exposure piece last time. So I did talk about a lot of good stuff, even though I said that episode was terrible. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about the exposure piece, whatever. And sometimes people have to hear it in your testimony. They have to hear it in what you've gone through to recognize, not only do I relate, not only is that me, but now I see my way out, right? So I will say, in all of my craziness, I would just sometimes have a conversation. And when I say numerous times, people are like, oh, hey, actually, I got let go. Oh, hey, actually, I'm in the same boat and I'm trying to make my business work. Oh, hey, I'm in the same boat. I quit because I'm taking on a completely different industry. anytime I talked about it, every single woman was like, Kim, we got you. We've been there. One of those women was my cousin, Curleen. And she told me about her very similar situation and how one of the ways that she flourished was with this journal. And I've been working through this book called 100 Days of Believing Bigger. It's a devotional journal, and it's by Marshawn Evans Daniels. Marshawn, if you're listening, I love this journal. Anyway, today, the entry I was doing was about indecision. And I won't read any of it, actually. I'm just going to read the prompt because I want you guys to come along with me as we kind of do this episode. But the prompt said, how does fear tend to show up as indecision in your life? And I'm like, child, all the ways. But what I did was I kind of reverse engineered this entry, and I first started with a decision that I made that I have been questioning, even though I feel sure about. And that is the decision that I talked about in that last episode that I said was bad, and that's the decision of leaving my job. So I wrote down what to me felt like the scariest thing that I've done lately. And I encourage you to do the same thing because there's a reason. Because it's not that I'm not working right now. I'm both on nonprofit, podcast, and nursing, a version of day shift nursing, which is very different. But the point is that decision was big because that felt like the ultimate shift from where I was career-wise. And so when I wrote it down, I want you to hear how it came out. When I wrote down the scariest decision that I made recently, it came out like this. I left my job and was worried I did the wrong thing, though I felt led to. And after I wrote that statement, I paid attention to all the tension I felt all throughout that statement. I felt tension and I left my job. I felt tension and I'm worried I did the wrong thing. I felt tension in even though I felt led to part. And I felt tension all throughout this entire statement because I think that the statement is hopping off the paper to me to tell me there's room for me to be a little bit more transparent and a little bit more accountable. And as a result, I then went on to write bullet points of what am I actually saying? What's between the lines, right? Like, so if I wrote that in black and white, what's the gray that sometimes needs to get out in order for us to feel lighter, right? So, of course you can do this exercise if you're like, I haven't made any decisions because fear is literally just keeping me stuck there. Like, if you just want to answer how does fear tend to show up as indecision in your life, you can. I can answer that. I know for me it's overthinking and it's definitely over praying. But if you want to maybe do the exercise from let's take accountability for a decision we made that we're still freaking out over, then that's where I think the reverse engineering helps. And I think that if you write a statement just like I just did, just look at it. Take a moment, look at what's the gray that you're not writing down, because chances are that's the part that you need to hear, that's the part that you need to feel, and that's the part that's going to make you feel more released, more free, and more secure in your decision. Because I think a lot of the reasons why we feel indecisive or why we feel fearful, I'll speak for myself and you might relate, is because I'm worried that I did something wrong. I'm worried about the consequences that are going to come. But the truth be told, that we have to own that too, right? And we also can't move through life so negatively. We have to move through feeling like if we did the best with the information that we have, that there's going to be, sure, maybe not some not so great things, but there's going to be maybe overwhelmingly positive outcomes. And so I think if you're battling to know, is my fear in all of this a result of me making a bad decision? Filling in the gray should help give you clarity there. It should show you, oh man, I did this for the wrong reasons, or it should show you I did this for all the great reasons, and so just relax and go for the ride. I will real quick speak to the overpraying aspect because I do think that that's going to be important here. In that entry, in the devotional, the author speaks about over spiritualizing, sometimes factoring into our fears with indecisiveness. And, I think traditionally I've always thought of over spiritualizing as that person who uses God as the reason why they can't do anything, right? Common sense goes out the window, responsibility, accountability, none of that matters because they just use God as an excuse. And I'll admit that I strongly dislike that. However, this entry kind of exposed a blind spot for me, the other side of that coin, that where some people may use God as the reason why they can't do anything, potentially, uh, verifiably. I use God sometimes as the reason for why I can't change anything or change many things. So if I'm in my comfort zone, if I'm doing what feels responsible, what feels like it's me, and if God now maybe requires or prompts for a leap of faith that pulls me out of that comfort zone into a growth zone, then ooh, I'm going to need you to write that across the sky, God, and bold print, because just no, 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 no. So that is my version of over spiritualizing. And because I think God is a good parent, again, I think he looks at moments like those and he's like, no, 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 that won't do. You need the mature lesson on what faith looks like, and that's where I think we are. So, and so, yes, I may have left my job and was worried that I did the wrong thing, though I felt led to do so. But if I wrote that again, right, with more accountability, if I wrote that again with full truth, if I wrote that again with freedom of, not worried about people's expectations, not worried about how it would sound, not worried about any judgment, then I wrote down a couple bullets of what is most truth about that statement. And what's truth is that maybe I didn't do everything perfectly in terms of the pressure that I put on myself, but what I still need not regret my decision. Here's why I know that I still made the best decision or the overall right decision, even though I didn't do everything perfectly, is because one, I have been considering pivoting from doing my career as I have done it for quite some time. This is a truth that I needed to write down and I needed to say out loud and release. I felt a release because that is true for me. The other accountable part that I wanted to put there is that truth is I didn't love my schedule and I didn't love the impact it had over my role as a mom and over my life as a person. And yes, this filtered into many of my roles, whether as a wife, a mom, a sister, a friend, all the things. But the primary way that my schedule no longer felt ideal was concerning how it affected me, my existence. Didn't say I didn't love things about the position. Didn't say I didn't love the people. Didn't say I didn't love what I was accomplishing. I said that I didn't love my schedule. And I didn't love the impact that my schedule had on me and on my roles. Okay. Very freeing release. Truth. Here's another truth in that. I did it already. Meaning, this probably should have been the last week. I did it. I left the job already, sis. So there's no going back. There's only going forward, which I've talked about a lot in this podcast. Release. You see, that me naming that truth and being accountable for what's what, release. The tension is getting lower, is getting lighter. Here's another point that I wrote. My mom needed support. And doing life as I was, right? With the night shift, the full-time night shift, the kids, blah, 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 blah. Plus my mom needing support. So doing life as I was possible. It could have been possible. I could have continued on that route, but I would have had to do it at a cost that I didn't want or need to pay. That's a good one. Okay, I'll say that again, that sure, I left my job and I was worried I did the wrong thing, though I felt led to do it. And that has given me a lot of fear because I've been overthinking about it. I've been over spiritualizing about it. But at the bottom line, at the end of the day, my mom did need support. My mom did have a stroke. My mom did need 100% supervision. My mom did go from literally not being able to move one side of her body to graduating from using a wheelchair to using a walker to using a gait belt to walking, pretty independently on her own now because of the sacrifices that my sisters and I made. I literally cannot underestimate how much needing to say, Kim and your mom needed the support. It was real. The reason why I have to say that to myself is because I think sometimes when you hit like a shift in life and there's a lot going on, meaning, again, when I left my work, I knew my task. My first task was my mom. I literally felt like I exchanged one life for another, like one full-time responsibility for another. So it's funny because as much as as much as I thought it would give me more time for my kids, the first 9 months, I don't know, I was still out the house plenty, and that's okay because that was my priority at the time. But I think that when there's multi-layeredness going on, right, that while I'm dealing with my mom, I'm also sensing, I don't know that life is going to go back to the way it looked before. So while you're sensing that and you're trying to work all that out, and then as things kind of got better with mom, better, yes, not completely through, also, switching hands on who primarily does what within my sisters and I, again, just working together. As you do that now, and you're now having space and room to navigate what this shift looks like, what life is going to look like now. I was trying to work that out, and now it just feels like this leaving work thing became about. It just felt like it became about everything and nothing all at the same time, and so it does ground me to sit and say, hey, and also one of those bullet points that you have to mention to yourself, Kim, is your mom did need you. That she still does. And that did matter, and it does matter, and it did exist, and it does exist. It's like the M&M commercial. They do exist. Yes, they do exist. Because sometimes you can get in this automation of doing something. You can lose grounding that all of this was necessity and all of it was for a reason. And you can start to maybe get into this gray area of what am I doing? What is life right now? I don't know if that makes sense, but hopefully it makes sense to you that, there could be many reasons, and let's say you make a shift for reason A, but you know that reason B, C, D are still going to play in what life looked like after. By the end, you could kind of lose your bearings as to what am I doing again, and what was all this for. And so it takes moments like this to ground you, like, yeah, these were all reasons A, B, C, D all mattered, but at the end of the day, again, here's the accountability piece. I'm not going back to how life looked like before because that's my decision. And maybe A, B, C, D were needed to paint clarity on what's important, what you want your life to look like, why the detour happened, and all of the above. And one last thing I'll say about the whole mom point. I really want to stress the fact that in that point I said that I could have continued doing it all, but if I would have done it, it would have been at a cost that I didn't want or need to pay. I think that want or need to part is very, very big when it comes to decision making, because sometimes I think why we fear our decisions is because we really fear what we want and need. Like, it's ringing very loud, I need rest. It's ringing very loud, I want or desire or need a change. And sometimes we're afraid of what we desire and need. And so that brings in the indecisiveness. It speaks to what we're willing to deny regarding ourselves, and that is very relatable to me. I am quite willing to deny myself things I need and or want if it doesn't seem responsible or if it doesn't make sense for the greater picture, and oftentimes for others. But sometimes you do have to allow yourself what you need and want so that you have the capacity to grow into who you are and do more for those that you care about. Will it always be easy? No. And that's where the cost thing comes in. You have to weigh the cost, because I didn't make the change because I was bawling and could handle it. I didn't make the change because my husband was bawling and could handle it. We both had to be on board for what the sacrifice would look like to make that pivot. And we both were. And I think it's just a matter of choosing your cost and choosing your heart. And so the last point that I wrote was kind of like a summary, I think, of all the reasons why I actually made this decision. And I wrote that in summary, pretty much, I made the decision to leave work, but also in that, I made the decision to care for my mom. I made the decision to be more present for my kids. I made a decision to find another way at life, making money and having a career. Slash, I made a decision to take a chance on my podcast and my nonprofit. We all go forward. And I made the decision to work in nursing right now in a specialty that I've never aspired to, yet now I am loving and valuing in a way that I didn't expect. And I do think this also falls under the Department of God and has a sense of humor. So, we're out in this is to say that, why now, right? I think that that's why did I touch on the fact that I felt led, because I shed light on the I left my job part. I shed light on why I was worried and that I did the wrong thing. And I think that the part that's left for me to address in that prompt or in my initial response was though I felt led. What's the most freeing statement? What's the most truthful statement that I can make about that? What's the most accountable statement that I can make about the though I felt led part? And that made me think about the timing. And if I look at why now, I do feel that that is the part that is God. Because I think a lot of those those points that I talked about, I've felt them at different points in my career, different points in my life. We all go through it, especially, I don't want to say especially, but particularly when you become a parent, even when you don't wish to walk away from your schedule or the craziness of your schedule, I feel that you become very cognizant of the balance, right? To be full-time professional, full-time parent. It's two different hats and both require you to clock in. There are no off days. And I guess my point here is that I understood what it felt like to think about pivoting and yet not fully pivot. I understood what it felt like to not love my schedule. No nurse really does. And a lot of nurses don't, and to still continue. I understood what it was like to be a caregiver. Caregiving has been a theme in my family, whether it was my grandma or my mom. As a professional, I have always balanced caregiving between generations, children, marriage, ministry, extracurriculars. I've always balanced that as a full-time worker. Always. And the 2 times I didn't, God's timing. And I want to use my grandma to demonstrate just how much, again, because I want you guys to see yourself potentially reflected in me. So I want to use my grandma to demonstrate just how much I know that if it's not God's timing, I would not budge from doing things the way I know to do it. And when it is God's timing, how I have and why I have. So here's what's ironic. When I first started my job in the ICU, I did a transfer from a unit in the same hospital. So I went from med-surg tele to ICU. And the literal day, I remember it like it was yesterday, my last day in med-surg tele that I was supposed to be there, my grandmother died. And so I'm starting this new job in the ICU, I think within that same week. And so the week that my grandmother died is the same week I'm in the ICU. I'm learning, yet I'm documenting and crying. And I'm taking bathroom breaks. Why? To take calls from florists and the cemetery and the reception venue, because my sisters and I were very heavily involved in the planning. And I personally felt ownership that her homegoing service, her funeral, be done in a way that I felt that she deserved. And so why didn't Kim just say, hey, P.S., my grandma died? Well, I literally didn't want anyone to think for a second that I would be using the most important person in my life as an excuse to not live up to my responsibilities. And so I didn't say anything. I documented, let the tears roll down, roll them back up, like I said, and planned a funeral around starting a new unit. And of all places, a CVICU. It took someone saying like, Kim, they give bereavement days. Someone in my personal life, or I don't know, maybe at work, for loss of grandparents. And I think it was like just a couple days before the funeral. And I think I still was on shift maybe like another day. And I finally said to my CNE at the time, like, hey, I didn't mention this, but my grandparent died. And she's like, why didn't you say anything? Yes, let's X you off the schedule. I say that to show like someone that I love like more than myself, who took me years to be able to talk about her without tearing up and still maybe not successfully. Um, I was willing and able to work through that moment because it felt like it's what I had to do. And so it's clear that I understand sacrifice. But what also becomes overwhelmingly clear is that I understand rigidity, which is not helpful. So timing in my crazy personality almost always has to be something that's right. It has to be something that's good. When the truth is that timing has to be something that's God's domain. It's not mine. I think there's a reason why I mentioned in the beginning that I am someone who overprays, because the person who overprays is constantly doubting whether or not they hear God. And overpraying is just a term because honestly, truth be told, I'm probably just overthinking out loud and including God in my overthinking. And I'm not really trusting that I'm hearing him, and I'm not really fully um surrendered to be dependent on him. And so I think God used that as a trial run to say to me, you do hear my voice. You do know what I sound like, because I want you to do this thing, and what you think it's for, you're going to fall flat on your face and you're going to think, I didn't hear him. But when you look back and see how I did weave the things properly together, now when I ask you to do it for real, you'll trust me. And I think that's why the second time around, which is what I'm explaining now, it's almost like I could not do it, because I felt like I heard you that time around. And even though I failed, like this is making me not want to listen to you again. I couldn't ignore. And I want to listen, because when I listened the first time, you showed me that there was a care in it. There was a reason. And I've got to remind myself of this every time I feel unsure, because that is what's going to make me feel most accountable. And to say, yeah, this is my decision and I'm sure about it because I've been led here. Bottom line, guys, is we can make our decisions. We're empowered to do so, and we have to quite literally make our own decisions. But God can make the timing. It's like life can feel like sometimes we're standing on a cliff and we're making a decision of not just to jump, but when to jump. And if you don't have eyes over the edge that can tell you when, I don't know, when the net is there for you to take the leap safely, then you're jumping blind, and that's a huge risk. But if you have a trusted source that can tell you the proper timing, not only will you jump and leap and probably experience the most exciting change or experience of your life, but you'll land safely. And I think that's the bottom line for what today's episode was about. When we make the certain decisions, hard decisions, big decisions, sometimes even small ones, but ones that feel consequential to us, where we are in life, we may have a lot of fear to even make it, or fear after we make it. But I end reminding us that accountability, like owning it, owning your why, is going to help erase a lot of those fears, and it's going to help you move forward. It won't be the last decision. It won't be the last pivot. And the better we get at being accountable in it, the more we can focus our energy and time and seeing the beauty in it and seeing God's design in it. And why is this important? Because as I've said, in a breaking camp, as I'm saying today, when we make the decision, we're going to have a lot of emotions around what we've just done, right? And what we'll find ourselves asking is the $1 million question: did I make the right decision? And I feel like that there are two answers to that. The first one, or two ways we can approach that question. The first way is with what we just did today. That exercise, great way, to look at the gray, get more free, get more honest, get more accountable, and that will ground you in whether or not you made the right decision. But the second way we can approach that, did I make the right decision? I think is to look at, well, who led you here? And this is where you have to know, like, if God led you to a bridge, then I think we're all practicing together to keep in mind that He will help us cross it. And this is where something that I was doing long before really plays into right now. Last year, before leaving my job, I remember I was really frustrated with just the emotions, the sensing, the feeling like, are we really going down this road again? And so I sat down with God and I was like, you know what? Again, you asked us to be transparent. Sometimes I feel like you're vague. Maybe I'm not asking the right questions. Maybe I'm not seeking hard enough. So I literally made a Google Doc, and I'm like, life is not going all the ways I want. I feel like you want to push me here in this direction. And so I have some wants, and this is what I want. You say you're what we need. He doesn't say he's only, but he says he's first. He says he's the source. He says he's our foundation. Um, so you say you're what we need. Then please help me see it. Help me understand in a deeper way that you're what I need. And so I literally made y'all a Google Doc. Listen, I want this. I want that. I want that. And when I tell you, God responded in showing me that He was what I needed. Again, I didn't say that God is the only person that we need. He doesn't say that He's the only person we need, but He says He's first, and He says He's the source. And I was intrigued. And I know you guys by now will be like, Kim, why do you be down on God? Because I'm human. And because, again, we hit pivots and decisions that really feel like this feels a deeper level. So all that to say that in response to that, I thought that it was just something I would keep for myself, like a lot of things that I've been experiencing over the past year or so. But I know that this is something that I'm going to share. And so I want to do them as like mini devotionals. I don't want to do it like breaking camp. My plan, I should say, because I get behind this mic and I start yapping, my bad. But my plan is to just do them as many little excerpts, and I think I'll call it like a Dear God series, just using that to demonstrate that when you're in a hard season or when you're in a fearful, insecure, indecisive season, and you're like, God, I want to feel accountable, or I want to feel grounded in what I've decided to do. And here's the biggest way we need to feel accountable. If you're a follower of Christ, we need to feel accountable and owning our decision to follow God, right? Because there is a surrendering there that won't always be comfortable. And because I want to feel comfortable there, I need to know that I'm in the right place. I think that's fair. And so that was my approach. I think I need to know that I'm in the right place. I need to know that you know that I want these things. And I need you to show me how either you are those things or how you have something better. I need to know. Somebody let me know. Okay, we did that a couple episodes. But it applies. What they really want from Jesus. Okay, all right. And that's how we end. So here are some of the things that I wrote. I needed, or I want this, whatever. Y'all get what I'm saying. And if you relate to any of this, look out for those episodes. So something that I said that I want wisdom. What I need, the answer was Jesus. I'm trying to tell you, I'm going to talk about it. I said, I want friendship. Ooh, this is probably one of my favorite ways that God answered this question biblically. Here was another one of my top faves that, read me to filth. I want control of my schedule, God. Because we can answer, how can God give us control of our schedule? But how can God be the actual control of my schedule? Answer for me, please. And He did. I wrote down, I want wealth and financial stability. I want giving/changing power. Like, I want to be able to give and change lives. He answered that. I just literally wrote I want happy. Here was this one, God read me to filth in this one. I want happy, content, kind, strong, brave, savvy, intelligent, healthy, spiritual children. I wrote that. A mouthful, but I was being very specific. Yo, I was confidence. I can't go into all that, so don't start putting in requests. Like, if I was a good podcaster, I would say, let me know which one of you, but I don't know if I'm ready for that. So I like that the responses I've gotten so far with some of the very unique ones, like Kim, why would you say that to God, and why would he answer you? And he did, because if he says, if you seek, you shall find, and your girl found. So I'll be sharing those with you guys, and I hope that this episode was not another terrible one, but if it was, I'm sorry for you. And Kiki Palmer, I'm sorry for that man. I do not know that man. I do not know y'all. I do know y'all, but I don't know the version of y'all that's sorry that I did this, because I'm sorry and I love y'all. And that's it, guys. Let's keep getting accountable in our fear, accountable in our decisiveness, and let's go forward. Hey guys, thank you so much for rocking out with us in this episode. Listen, if you are feeling we all go forward, I ask of you, subscribe. I don't want you to miss whenever our episodes drop. Also, remember, as we move in the right direction, that is forward and progressing, never stagnant, we become a resource to help others move in the right direction as well. And the cycle continues, but only if we move. If you go and I go, then we all go forward. Let's get moving.